so much. I love that exercise, and as I'm sitting there watching him do it, I had not seen it before. I'm like, 10 minutes from now, you're all going to be looking at your phones wondering, what is my colleague going to say back to me when I sent them a note that says, I love you? So everyone in the room today has a very similar goal, and that is, how can we help something catch on? We all have something that we want to become more popular. It might be a product that we're trying to get to catch on among consumers. It might be a service that we're hoping to catch on among customers. It might be an idea that we're hoping to catch on within our organizations. We're a nonprofit. We want to help grow and be more successful. How do we do that? And so today I'm going to talk about the power of word of mouth to get our products, ideas, and services to catch on. We'll talk about how word of mouth is 10 times more effective than traditional advertising. There's only one question. How do we get more of it? How do we get people to talk about and share our stuff? How do we get our stuff to catch on? But before we get there, I want to start in a very different place. Today's going to be an interactive session. I want to get your minds working a little bit. So we're going to play a game. And I promise it's a game you've never played before, but you'll get the hang of it very quickly. It's called Which Is Tastier? And so I'm going to put up two things on the screen, and I'm going to ask you which of those things is tastier. And you have only one job. It's an easy job. I want you to be honest. Not what you wish was tastier, not what you think should be tastier, but which of the two things is actually tastier? I promise you will get the hang of it quite quickly. So our first contestant is a wonderful, delicious head of broccoli. And you're probably aware that broccoli has a lot of vitamins and nutrients. You're probably aware that broccoli has a lot of fiber. You may not have realized that broccoli has a lot of vitamin C, but it does. So the next time you're sick and you think you need an orange, try a nice stalk of broccoli instead. That's our first contestant. And our second contestant is a hot dog, a sausage. This is not my version of a hot dog or sausage. If I was going to eat one, I might put a little bit of bacon on top. I might put some sauerkraut. Feel free to put whatever toppings you like on the hot dog or sausage. And feel free to put whatever toppings, to be fair, you like on the broccoli as well. Okay, we're going to vote. Which is tastier? How many would go with the hot dog sausage? Okay, most of you. How many of you would go with the broccoli? Okay, a few here and there. Are you guys vegetarians? No? Liars? Okay, I'll let your colleagues guess based on how well they know you. The point here, though, is really simple. We all know that we should eat more fruits and vegetables. We all know that that's the right thing to do. Organizations spent decades of time and millions, if not billions, trying to convince us to eat more fruits and vegetables. And yet when push comes to shove, we don't do it. When it's late at night, when we're on the road, when we're tired, right? The tasty thing beckons, the sausage beckons, and it's not random or luck how it works. It fits better with the way our tongues and our stomachs are designed. Certain food, very simply, is just tastier than others. McDonald's has spent millions of dollars engineering French fries, the right amount of crisp and salt and sugar. They hit your tongue just lights up. Right? Certain food is tastier than others. Now, you're probably sitting there going, okay, great, I agree with you. Certain food is tastier than others. What does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with my business, getting my product, my idea to catch on? Well, I want to take that idea of certain food being tastier than others and port it to a slightly different domain. And that is, how tasty is the way we communicate. How tasty is the way we share our products, ideas, and services to others. Because just like certain food is tastier to people's tongues and their stomachs, certain ideas, certain messages, certain ways of communicating information are going to be more successful based on the way they fit with people's minds. If we understand the science behind word of mouth and social transmission, we understand why people talk and share, we can engineer things to be more successful. And so I'll talk about three things today. I'll talk about how we can make our communications tastier by understanding that science of word of mouth and social transmission. I'll talk about how we can grow our businesses and organization by bringing in new customers and consumers, and how we can get our products, services, and ideas to catch on. But before we get there, one more thing from me. Here are three products or brands you're probably familiar, at least a few of, with them. First, we have Walt Disney World, self-described place where dreams come true. Everyone has probably heard of Walt Disney World. Second, we have Honey Nut Cheerios. In the United States, that's a popular brand of cereal, food to eat at breakfast. And the last is Scrubbing Bubbles. Scrubbing Bubbles is a bathroom cleaner. It doesn't actually have faces on the bubbles, but they do a good job of cleaning the bathroom. If you had to guess, which one of these three things do you think get the most word of mouth? Is it Disney, is it Cheerios, or is it Scrubbing Bubbles? And I've asked this question to thousands of people. At this point, probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And the answer that many people give is probably the same answer you're thinking about. You're looking up there saying, man, it's probably Walt Disney World, for sure. Why would anyone talk about breakfast cereal, or why would anyone talk about a bathroom cleaner? And I think a few things, two things in fact, are interesting about this question. First, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about what people talk about and what people share. By some measures, we talk about dozens of products and services and ideas every day. Each of us does. Yet we don't often pay attention to what we talk about, right? We don't often realize what we're talking about, yet what we talk about has a big impact on what everyone else does, right? So we need to understand how word of mouth affects behavior. And if we look at something like this, we say, of course it's Disney World, right? How could it be anything else? And this is sort of a cheap parlor trick, right? Because one's going to win, two are going to lose. None of you probably work for any of these companies, so you might wonder what it has to do with you. Well, the first thing is interesting and important. Looking at these three, it's not actually Disney World. And it's not actually scrubbing bubbles. It's Cheerios. The breakfast cereal gets talked about more than any of the others. And what I think that points out is there's a gap in our knowledge, right? There's a lot of hype out there around word of mouth, around social media, around viral marketing. If we don't understand why people talk and why people share, we're going to let us spend a lot of time and money and effort and energy in the wrong place. We've got to understand the behavioral drivers that drive word of mouth and how to use that to get our stuff to catch on. And so that's a long-winded introduction to a title slide. As was nicely mentioned, I'm Professor Jonah Berger. I'm a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. What I'll do today in sort of the 40 minutes we have together is give you a brief tour of my recent New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Contagious: Why Things Catch On. We spent the last 15 years studying why people talk and why they share. We've looked at tens of thousands of brands, thousands of pieces of online content, and millions of purchases around the United States and around the world. And again, we see the same factors driving behavior. And so today I'll talk a little about those factors. I'll give you some examples of the science, and I'll talk about how you can apply them as well. We'll have time at the end for questions, so Bill, feel free to think about how you might apply these ideas and bring up questions at the end. And if you don't find me for questions, feel free to reach out at J1Berger on Twitter. I'm happy to answer questions there as well. So it goes without saying that word of mouth is quite important. And in case you don't believe me, none other than McKinsey pointed out that word of mouth generates more than twice the sales of traditional advertising. And by traditional advertising, you don't just mean television ads or radio spots or magazine ads. Any piece of information that comes from a company rather than a peer. That can be your website, that can be the phone calls that you send, give prospective clients, the emails you send, the brochures, anything that comes from a brand or an organization rather than a peer. And in fact, if you look at the data, a dollar spent on word of mouth goes 10 times as far in terms of ROI as a dollar spent on traditional advertising. Any idea why? There are kind of two key reasons why word of mouth is more effective. Any idea what one of them might be? Trust. Whoever said trust, what do you mean by trust?
We believe the guy who's sending the message.
Okay, but you don't believe ads? Why not?
It's commercial, so it's someone trying to...
They're self-interested. You know they're trying to convince you. Notice, by the way, we all realize that in our own lives. Yet many of us still spend a lot of money advertising. We think that when our ad comes on, somehow the consumer or customer says, it's your ad, it must be true. All the other stuff is not true, but yours must be true, right? The challenge is, just like your colleague pointed out, people don't trust ads. They know the ads are trying to convince them of something, so they turn it off and they tune it out. Shampoo ads are always like this. Every shampoo ad you've ever seen is basically the same. There's a woman or a man with long or short flowy hair, and then they use the shampoo and they get an attractive spouse. You've never seen a shampoo ad where they use the shampoo and they get an ugly spouse. Never. You've never seen that. It's always an attractive spouse. Restaurants, you go there, the kids always look happy in the ads, right? Travel destinations, everyone always has a fun time, right? Ads always say we have the best products, we have the best service, we have the best people out there. We care about you. Most innovative stuff. No company says, oh, service? We're not so good at service. Actually, recently a survey put us in the bottom 10% on service, but there you can go see our competitors first. They have better service than us, and if they're busy, no, come see us. Everyone says they're the best. But because of that, right, we don't know whether to trust them, but our friends, our colleagues will tell it to us straight. Hey, I worked with that company, they were great, or hey, they weren't so good. So that first benefit is trust. But the second one is a little more nuanced. That's the targeting benefit of word of mouth. How do we find new customers? New consumers, new people who might be interested in what we have to offer. And it's tough, right? We spend a lot of money on targeting. Online, digital sometimes allows us to target better, but it's still hard to find the right people. What if we could use other people to do that work for us? A couple years ago, I got a free book in the mail. Academics often get free books from publishers. They send them to us with the hopes that we'll sign them to our students, and they'll sell more copies in the process. But this time I didn't get one book, I got two. And it wasn't two different books, it was two copies of the exact same book. And I remember sitting there at my desk going, 2 copies of the same book, why the second copy? And there's a note in the back of the one that said, hey, Professor Berger, we think you'll like this book, but we think you'll also know someone else who will like this book. Pass the second copy on to them. And that's the first very simple hack I'm going to share with you this afternoon. How by turning customers into advocates, can we get them to do the work for us? Because I didn't, right? The company didn't have to go out and figure out who it was. I did the work for them. I walked down the hall to give a book out to my colleague who I thought would find it most interesting or most relevant. No wonder that referred business, people that come in from existing clients or customers, has about 20% higher customer lifetime value. Because someone went through their social network almost like a searchlight to say, this person would like what you have to offer, this person wouldn't. If we can get our customers to do the work for us, we can get them to do the targeting. One more great example of this that I think is very fun. This is Uber from a couple holiday seasons ago. They said, hey, having a holiday party, request free rides for your guests here. That's obviously very nice of Uber to give free rides to your guests, but notice it's not just nice. They said, hey, existing user, who in your social network might like this? Pass this on to them. If we can get our customers, our clients, whatever you want to call them, our consumers, to talk about and share our message, they'll figure out who to share it to and help us get better targeting. There's only one question. How do we get people to talk and how do we get them to share? And usually, when we think about sharing, we think online. We think about Facebook, we think about Twitter, we think about LinkedIn, we think about blogs, online reviews, TripAdvisor. If you had to guess from 100%, all of it, all the way down to 0, none of it, what percent of word of mouth would you guess is online? From all of it, 100% all the way down is online. What do you think? What number? Someone want to guess? What do you think? Nobody at all? Well, I'll do a show of hands. How many of you think 60%? 70%? 80%? 90%? 50%? 40%? 30%? 20%? 10%? You all aren't voting. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. No problem. It's about 7 to 10%. 7 to 10% of word of mouth is online. And that's a lot lower than I think many of us might think. I would say, oh, but the kids, they're always on their devices talking. It must be very, very high. Only about 7 to 10% of word of mouth is online. And a lot of organizations I work with say, wow, that's really small. Why are we investing so much money in social media? And I often say, well, that's a really good question. Because it's not that social media is not a channel through which word of mouth flows. It certainly is. But most word of mouth is offline, face-to-face. People talking to one another at the breakfast table, grabbing beers with their friends after work. Most word of mouth is face-to-face. And more important than the technology is the psychology. Why are people talking and why are they sharing? Because you can have thousands of friends and followers and connections on social media, but if they don't share your stuff, it's not going to matter. This cartoon, I think, illustrates it really nicely. It's a little morose. It's a funeral. He asked about a wedding or a funeral. This is a funeral. And it said he had over 2,000 Facebook friends. I was expecting a bigger turnout. I think lots of organizations were expecting a bigger turnout. There was no notion if we just collected friends and followers, we'd be successful. But if they don't share our stuff, it's not going to matter. I did a big project a couple summers ago with a major consumer electronics firm. It has about 10 million followers on Twitter. Most of their posts get 5, 10, 25, 35 retweets. Very small numbers. Why? Because they're not driving people to talk and share. So how can we get people to share, whether online or off? Well, good news. It's not random, it's not luck, it's not chance. There's a science behind why people talk and why they share. As I mentioned, we've looked at thousands of pieces of online content, tens of thousands of brands, millions of purchases. Again and again, we see the same 6 factors come up. In Contagious, I put them in a framework called the STEPS framework. That stands for social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories. Each of these is a psychological driver of why people talk and why they share. It's not about B2B or B2C. It's not about products versus services versus ideas. It's about the psychology of why we talk and why we share. Before we came in here, everyone was upstairs having fruit and milling around outside, drinking champagne. You were talking to one another. Notice what you talk about. What you talk about has a big impact on what other people do, right? It's going to have a big impact on what they buy, what they use, and what they try. How can we get more people talking about our stuff? And so what I'll do today is I'll talk about 3 of these. I'll talk about social currency, talk about triggers, and I'll talk about stories in the interest of time. I won't be able to touch on the other 3, but I'll let you check them out in the book or read about them online. I'll give you some examples of the science behind each of them and some case studies of how you can apply it. One more thing, though, before we get there. That is this number 91%. In a mixed audience like this, I use mostly business-to-consumer examples. Why? Because they're easier for a large group to understand. But I know some of you might work in a B2B industry, a business-to-business industry. And you might say, God, consumers care about word of mouth, but not business owners, right? I mean, business owners are really serious people. Word of mouth doesn't matter. 91% of new business leads in B2B markets comes from guess where? Existing business. Most word of mouth, most of your new customers, clients, people coming in already, are already through word of mouth. All we're trying to understand is how to get more of it. And so it's not about B2C or B2B, it's about B2P. The underlying person underneath making that decision. The underlying psychology that drives them to talk and drives them to share. All right, so let's spend a couple minutes jumping into the steps. And to do this, I want you all to imagine that you're visiting New York City. So imagine it's a Saturday afternoon, you're in the United States, you're visiting New York City, you've done all the touristy stuff, you've gone up to the Empire State Building, you've walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, and now it's hungry, your stomach is rumbling a bit, you're hungry, you have to get a bite to eat. When you notice a big hot dog-shaped sign out in front of a restaurant, sausage-shaped sign out in front of a restaurant, with the words "Eat Me" written on it in what look like mustard. You said, I haven't had a hot dog in a while, check this place out. So you walk down a flight of stairs into a restaurant called Criff Dogs. Now, if you like sausage, you like hot dogs, you'll be in heaven. Criff Dogs has every hot dog you can imagine, over 30 on the menu. From a good morning hot dog with bacon, eggs, and cheese. I don't know if you want to eat it for breakfast, but interesting nonetheless. A hot dog with green onion and pineapple, and a traditional New York-style water dog with just ketchup and mustard. So you finish eating your hot dog when you notice something unusual in the corner of the room, corner of the screen. Almost looks like a phone booth. You say, I haven't seen one of those in a while. I'll check it out. So you slide open the door, and you walk inside. It's pretty cramped inside. It's a phone booth after all. But on the wall, you'll see something you probably haven't seen in 25, maybe 30 years. Do you remember rotary dial phones? Remember those phones you had to stick your finger and had to go around in a circle at your parents', or maybe for some of you, your grandparents' house? Stick your finger and you had to go around in a circle. Just for fun, there's a rotary dial phone. Stick your finger in the number 3, go around in a circle, and hold the phone up to your ear. Well, the phone will actually ring. It'll go ring, ring. Then someone will pick up the other line, and they'll ask you whether you have a reservation. Now, the first time I heard this story, I said, reservation? I'm in a phone booth. It's out of a hot dog restaurant. What could I possibly have a reservation for? But if you're lucky, and they happen to have space, or a friend of yours happen to make a reservation, the back of that phone booth will open. And you'll be led into a secret bar called Please Don't Tell. Now, Please Don't Tell has violated a number of traditional laws of marketing, traditional laws of communication. No sign inside the restaurant, no sign on the street. They've done everything they can to make themselves difficult to find. And yet, every day they're full. By 3 p.m., phone lines open up. By 3:30, all the seats are gone. People hit redial again and again and again, trying to get through. It took me 2 weeks to get into this place. Calling every day, I got on a Tuesday night at about 6:30, not the most popular time. And it's not lack of competition. Just like you, there's lots of competition. You may not have been to New York recently, but there's more than one bar in New York City. It turns out there's actually a few bars on that side of the street in New York City, a few more on the other side of the street, dozens of bars in a couple block radius. So how did they get so popular? What did they do to cut through the clutter? Well, they did something interesting. They made themselves a secret. And let me tell you a little secret about secrets. Think about the last time someone told you something, and they told you not to tell anyone else. What's the first thing you then did with that information? You told somebody, right? Because having access to information that not everyone else knows makes you look smart and makes you look in the know. It gives you what I'll call social currency. Just like the car we drive and just like the clothes we wear, the things we talk about and the things we share affect how other people see us. So one way to get people to talk about us, our message, our product, our service, our idea, is to make them look good. Too often as organizations, we think a lot, how do we look? Do I stand up straight when I'm speaking? Does my ad look pretty? Do people like my product, my service, my idea? We think a lot less about how they're going to look when they talk about it and share it. because the better they're going to look, the more likely they'll be to pass it on. So let's spend a couple minutes on this idea. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. Her name is Carla, and this is a picture of her car. And I want to see how much you can guess based on this one piece of information. So if you had to guess, for example, how old might you guess that Carla is? You might say she's between maybe 32 to 48. Yeah, maybe 32 to 48, okay. Does she have kids? Yes. Do they play sports? Yes. What sport do they play? You might say soccer or football, right? We make these inferences because choices communicate information. Car we drive, but also the clothes we wear. I thought a lot about what to wear to come see you guys today. Sometimes I get up on a stage like this and I don't have a sport coat, a jacket on, and during the question and answer period, someone will raise their hand and they will say, "Are you 23 years old?" I know some of you are thinking it. That's okay, no problem. So I wear a jacket to encourage you to think I'm at least 28 and have my own credit card and can buy my own clothes. Because if I came in here today wearing shorts and a t-shirt, as I'd much prefer to be wearing this wonderfully warm afternoon, you probably wouldn't take me seriously, right? What we drive, what we wear is a signal of who we are. Well, guess what? Same with what we talk about and what we share. If you talk a lot about new restaurants, people think you're a foodie. You talk a lot about technology, people assume you know a lot about that. What we share is a signal of who we are. If you ever look online, most posts are positive. Look at me, I'm on vacation. Look at me, I met a celebrity. Look at me, I'm in first class. My feet have so much room. Nobody posts, everyone has a friend who posts the first class photo. Nobody posts, "Hey, look at me, I'm at the office, working on an Excel spreadsheet. Check out column C." Nobody shares that. Last time I checked, most of us spend a lot more time at the office working on Excel spreadsheets than we do in first class. Yet we'd share the first class photo, but not the Excel spreadsheet. Why? Because it wouldn't make us look very good. We select among the things that happen to us what to talk about and share to selectively make ourselves look good to others. That's true. We all do it. Everyone does it. How do we take advantage of that? Well, one way is how can we make people feel like insiders? How can we make them feel smart, special, in the know, like they're not like everyone else? By working with us, they have access to information, ideas, and things that make them look good rather than not so good. A few years ago, I worked with LinkedIn on a consulting project, and we sent emails out to many of their users saying, "Hey, you have one of the most influential profiles on LinkedIn, most viewed profiles on the website, top 1% or top 5% of all profiles." Now, people who got this email felt very good, but they didn't just feel good. Guess what else they did? Shared it. Because status is only good if other people know that you have it. If you're influential on LinkedIn but no one else knows, it doesn't matter. Status is only good if other people know that you have it, and so we share with others to get that status. People love talking about their frequent flyer status. I'm gold this, or platinum that, or ruby, diamond, whatever it is, right? The airport lounge in Rome, Fiumicino, no longer has the hummus that I love. What is that person saying? They're saying, "I'm busy, I'm important, I travel a lot." But no one wants to be friends with someone that would actually say, "I'm busy, I'm important, I travel a lot." So they have to have ways to underbrag or humble brag, ways to signal desired things without seeming like they're doing it. This is a great way to do that, right? Nobody cares about LinkedIn. They don't care if you join LinkedIn, but by sharing this with you, it gives them that social currency. Lots of great examples of this. A few years ago, Beyonce came out with a new album. No advertising. All she did was put it on Instagram, the image, because she knew people would want to be the first person in their social networks to know about this new piece of information. If you know about something that no one else knows, it makes you look smart, special, and in the know. It gives you that social currency. If you ever look on YouTube, you notice what the first comment on a YouTube video often says? The first comment that's ever made on the video. Anyone know what it says often? First. Dibs. I got there before everyone else. Doesn't say I like the video, I hate the video, it says first. I am there before you. People love being early to have access to information, knowledge, and ideas. If we can give them that social currency by being connected to us, they'll talk and they'll share and they'll bring us along for the ride. Fun example of this, a guy named Dave McReady sent me a great example. He'd read Contagious, found it useful. He sells granola. Wilds and granola. And it turns out granola is a very competitive market. One granola tastes pretty similar to another granola. So how could he cut through the clutter? And so he was sending people free packets of his granola, saying, "Here, try Wildson." He was sending it to athletes and famous celebrities, and he wasn't really getting much back from it. So instead, he started sending them granola, rather than his name on it, with their name on it. So he sent them a packet of granola, for example. This is for Amy Fuller. She's an Olympian snowboarder from Canada. And he sent her a pack of granola and said, Amy, buy Wildson. And she took a picture of it. Why? Because it made her feel special. Very infrequently do we get to feel special. Do we get to feel smart, special, and to know like we're not like everyone else? Brands, organizations that make us feel special, we talk about and share, and we bring them along for the ride. Coke had a great campaign recently where they put people's names on the bottle. Great way to make people feel special, make people feel different, make them talk and make them share. Make customers, consumers, individuals feel special like insiders. They'll talk about us and bring us along for the ride. So that's one way to get social currency. In the book I talk about 4. I'll mention just one more here. And that is to find what I'll call the inner remarkability. And I think this is really important. Remarkability means worthy of remark. Something surprising, something novel, something interesting. And some of you may be sitting there going, okay, great, this is a lot of fun, but there's no way I could use this idea. Right? We have this notion that certain products, certain services, certain ideas get a lot of word of mouth, others not so much. A hidden bar, Tesla cars, new technology, those get lots of word of mouth, but B2B logistics, for example, don't get much word of mouth. What's a product or a service, doesn't have to be yours, that you think would be difficult to get people to talk about and share? What might be a product or service that would be difficult to get word of mouth about? What do you think? You could say socks, you could say pens, you could say dishwashers, you could say blenders. Let me show you an oldie but goodie, how an organization got over 200 million views for one of the least exciting things we can think of, and that is a blender.
Question. I love my new iPhone. It does everything. But will it blend? That is the question. Let's find out. I think I'm going to push the smoothie button. I smoke. Don't breathe this. Now, you fans on YouTube have asked me to blend an iPhone, so I did it. But I have another. I'm going to put this on eBay.
So I won't ask for a show of hands, but I imagine many of you found this at least a little bit remarkable. Right? This video has over 15 million views. The set has over 200 million. They do it for all sorts of products and things. They do one for the iPhone. They do one for golf balls. They've done them for Samsung phones. They recently did one for the Apple Watch. Blender sales go up over 700% when these videos come out. Now, any of us would be happy with a 700% sales increase. That would be amazing. That's not the most remarkable thing about this to me. They did this video for a $50 marketing budget. $50. That's about, I think, 400 or so kroner. Very cheap budget, right? You laughed at that poor guy. He's actually the CEO of the company. He's not an actor. The new marketing hire walked into the office, noticed a pile of sawdust on the floor. He said, "What's with the sawdust?" His colleague goes, "The CEO is doing what he does every day, which is try to break blenders." So CEO would take 2x4 pieces of wood, golf balls, Bic lighters, pennies, whatever he could find, chuck them in the blender to see if the blender was tough enough to cut it. Marketing guy thought this was genius, filmed his CEO doing what he's already doing, put it online, the rest is history. $50 marketing budget, 700% increase in sales, huge ROI. Still not the most remarkable thing about this to me. The most remarkable thing about this to me is that they did this for one of the least exciting things we can think of. If any of you are sitting there going, "Great, this is a fun idea, but there's no way I could use this idea," I want you to remember the blender. Nothing is less exciting than a blender. Whatever you are working on cannot be less exciting than a blender. It might be tied. They may be tied. They may be low on the list and tied, but it's not less exciting than a blender. Because it's not that certain things are naturally remarkable and the rest are doomed to fail. We can make people share anything if we find that inner remarkability, if we show them rather than tell them. Notice what they didn't do. They didn't stand up there and say, hey, we make a really powerful blender. They showed people how powerful the blender was, right? And I'll get back to this at the end, showing rather than telling. Right? If we show rather than tell, much more likely to engage individuals. Just another fun example of this that I'm sure many of you have seen. How many of you have seen the Jean-Claude Van Damme Volvo video from a couple of years ago? Okay, great. So Jean-Claude Van Damme driving backwards, doing a split. I cannot do a split, so I'm not going to demonstrate. But doing something like this, but further, between two Volvo trucks. Extremely remarkable. Hundreds of millions of views for Volvo. But what you notice is you realize they must have precise steering. Volvo didn't just do this because they're an entertainment company. They do this to show people how precise the steering of the trucks is. And how do you know the steering is precise? Well, if it wasn't precise, he'd be dead. Right? That's how you know it's precise. It shows rather than tells. And I'll come back to that at the end. Okay, so that's social currency. Next, I want to talk about the T, which is triggers. And triggers is very different than social currency. Once you hear it, it will make sense, but I guarantee none of you have thought of it already. And to talk about triggers, I want to use an ad from an insurance company about Hump Day. So insurance company Geico builds an ad about this thing called Hump Day. In the United States, maybe they have it here as well, but Monday's obviously the beginning of the work week, Friday's the end. Wednesday is called Hump Day because you have to get over the hump of Wednesday to get over to Friday. So insurance company Geico builds a piece of content based on this. There's an annoying camel walking through an office going, what day is it, what day is it, what day is it? Everyone ignores him, he's a very annoying camel. Finally, he comes across this poor woman, and she goes, it's Hump Day. And the camel goes, woo woo, and the ad goes, how happy are people who save money with Geico, that's the name of the insurance company, happier than a camel on Hump Day. Get it? Camels, humps, Hump Day? Camels have humps? Yes? Thank you. You're supposed to chuckle when I make a joke. Come on, I appreciate it. Okay, thank you. It is funnier when you see it on television. If you've never seen it, you can watch it online. It's funnier than I did it. It is. But it's not that funny. Yet this is the second most shared ad of a couple years ago. Not a beer ad, not a car ad, not a lingerie ad, an insurance ad. It's not the most exciting product category, insurance. Second most shared ad of a couple years ago. So one question is why? Why did so many people share an insurance ad? Well, I'm a data guy, dug a little deeper. This is what the share data looks like over time. There's a spike in shares, then it goes down. Then another spike, then it goes down. Then another spike, then it goes down. If you look closer, spikes aren't random. They're 7 days apart. And if you look even closer, you'll notice that they're every Wednesday, or as it's colloquially known, Hump Day. Right? This content is equally good or bad every day of the week. It's good or bad on Monday, good or bad on Tuesday, good or bad on Wednesday. But Wednesday rolls around, providing a ready reminder, what a psychologist would call a trigger, to make people think about it and talk about it and share it. Because if something's top of mind, it's much more likely to be tip of tongue. Again, too often we think, do people like us? And we assume if people like us, if they like our products and services and ideas, they'll talk about them. But if they're not thinking about our products or services or ideas, they're not going to talk about them. Right? 70% of purchase is consideration. A few years ago, they did a great study in the grocery store. They changed the music that played at the supermarket on different days. So some days they played French music, and some days they played German music. And what did they find? Well, on days they played French music, sales of French wine went up. And on days they played German music, you can probably guess, sales of German wine and beer went up. Did the music change what wine people like? No, they still like whatever wine they like. It just reminded them to think about it. Top of mind, tip of tongue, more likely to be purchased, right? There may be a restaurant wherever you're from that you love. You love eating at this restaurant. But if you don't think about that restaurant when you're going out to eat, you'll never go there. Because part of our decision-making is driven by, are we thinking about it or not? Top of mind, more likely to take action. So let's spend a couple minutes on this idea. Here's a little bit more data. This is word of mouth about that breakfast cereal brand I was mentioning, Cheerios, by time of day. So midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. What do you notice about when people talk about that breakfast cereal? When do they talk about it? Breakfast, when they're eating it. Notice how it's shifted to the right on the weekend? Any idea why? People sleep in. They wake up later. This is not rocket science. One reason people talk about things is they just used that thing. If I just ate a breakfast cereal, I'm much more likely to talk about it. If I just visited a restaurant, I'm much more likely to talk about it. If I just interacted with my insurance company, I'm much more likely to talk about it. When we use a product or service, it's top of mind and more likely to be talked about. But notice what happens the rest of the day. People don't keep talking about it because things don't stay top of mind. I hope you're enjoying this talk. I hope you're liking it. But notice, it's top of mind right now. It's not going to be in 4 hours when you're listening to someone else's talk. Their talk will be top of mind. Things don't stay top of mind. And so the challenge is if people don't use us very frequently, how do we make sure we come to mind more often? Well, there are other ways as well. So if I said peanut butter and, most people would say, well, jelly, at least in the United States, for example. Or if I said rum and, you might think of Coke. Notice that peanut butter is almost like a little advertisement for jelly. It's almost like jelly should pay peanut butter like a kickback or like a referral fee every time peanut butter's around. Because if peanut butter's around, jelly doesn't have to remind you it exists. Peanut butter does all the work for jelly. Michelob is a beer you may be familiar with. Used to have a slogan, weekends are made for Michelob. They wanted the people to think about the beer when the weekend rolls around. Corona's done the same thing with the beach. Right? I challenge you to go on a beach vacation and never think about Corona. It's impossible, right? You're lying in the sand, you got your sunscreen on. People tend to think about Corona because it's associated with the beach. And when they think about it, they think about a lime because it often has a lime in the top. Is that random? Is that luck? Is that chance? No. The beach is Corona's trigger. Or said very simply, the beach is Corona's peanut butter. And so what I'd ask you to think about is, okay, well, what's your peanut butter? What's the thing in the environment that will remind people of you even if you're not around? Because you can advertise, you can email them, and you can call them, you can tell them again and again how great you are. Or you can link yourself to a trigger, a peanut butter, and every time they see that peanut butter, they'll think of your jelly. Kit Kat did this a few years ago, the candy bar Kit Kat. Sales were down by about 30%. People liked it, but they weren't buying it. So they linked themselves to coffee. Having a coffee break, have a Kit Kat. Thinking about coffee, think about Kit Kat. Coffee and Kit Kat and coffee, best friends forever. If you're Kit Kat, why is coffee a really good trigger or really good peanut butter to link yourself to? Well, if you think about it, lots of people drink it very frequently, right? Many of you are probably going to go have a coffee during the break, right? If you link yourself to something frequent, it'll be top of mind more often and more likely to be tip of tongue, right? Top of mind, more likely to be tip of tongue. Weekends are made for Michelob was originally holidays are made for Michelob, but they moved it to the weekend because the weekend is more frequent. But it's not just about frequency, right? Frequency is good, but it's not just frequency. When we think about triggers, there are 4 key questions. The first question is, who do we want to be triggered? Who's that target segment that we want to make sure thinks of us? And then most importantly, when do we want them to think about us? When is the right time they need to think about us, right? Is it a certain day of week? Is it a time of day when a certain problem comes up? When do we want to be top of mind? What is around at that time? And how create a link to that thing? Those 4 questions, the who, the when, the what, and the how, will make sure we're top of mind at the right time and more likely to be purchased or more likely for people to take action. Okay, I'll skip this in the interest of time. I won't talk about emotion. The idea here is when we care, we share. Turns out emotions are a big driver of what people share, but it's not just that positive emotions increase sharing and negative decrease sharing. It's actually more complex than that. Some negative emotions actually increase sharing, so I'll let you read about that at a different time. I won't talk about public. The idea here is when it's easy to see, it's easy to imitate. I'll give you one quick example of practical value, and then I'll wrap up with stories. Imagine you sold something for $20 in American, or it could be kroner, and you want to discount it 5 off. What would that be in percentage terms, 5 off 20? I know you were promised there would be no math at this conference, but here's a very little bit of math. I'm sure you can handle it. 5 off 20 is what percent off? 25%. Good. I knew you guys could do it. And you agree these are economically the same, right? In both cases, you lose 5, the customer pays 15. They're economically the same, correct? Yes? Are they the same to the customer? No. Customer's much more likely to take this deal and to talk about it if it's 25% off rather than 5 off. In fact, you could even make it 24, 23, maybe even 20, and the deal would still sound better to them. You might say, well, that's weird. Are percentages off just more motivating? Well, hold on. If instead it was 2,000 and there it was 500 off or 25% off, again, I'll let the math sink in. Those are economically the same. 500 off is the same as 25% off. There, 500 off is more motivating. It's something I call the rule of 100. Numbers are not just numbers. How we frame those numbers makes them seem larger or smaller and changes whether or not people take action. Dick Thaler just recently won the Nobel Prize in Economics. A couple years ago, Danny Kahneman won it as well for work on loss aversion, prospect theory. How we frame numbers changes how people see those numbers and changes whether they're going to take action or not. When we give out numbers, they're not just numbers. We need to give them out in the right way to motivate desired action. Okay, let me wrap up by talking about stories. And if you've noticed, I've told a number of stories. And by the end of this conference, I hope you have a great time. But next week, notice what you remember. From this great slate of speakers, notice what you remember from all of them. Not just whether you enjoyed whether they talked, whatever they said, but whether you can remember anything they said. And I guarantee you'll remember the stories. Stories have a way of sticking, burrowing themselves in our minds so we can't forget them. But some stories are more effective than others, and that's what I want to talk about here. So imagine you're at a party, and someone walks up to you during the party and said, "Did you know that the sunglass company Maui Jim has great customer service?" What would you do if someone walked up to you that you didn't know at a party, something like tonight, someone you didn't know walked up to you and said, "Did you know that the sunglass company has great customer service?" You'd probably say, "Wow, that's really interesting. Hey, actually, I left my drink just in the other room. Can you hang out here for just a moment?" And then that person would never see you again, because no one wants to talk to someone that sounds like a walking advertisement. As much as people like your brand, your product, your service, your idea, they need an excuse to talk about you. Stories provide that excuse. A couple years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who bought a pair of Maui Jim sunglasses, loved them, but his dog got a hold of them and tore them to shreds. 25 pieces of sunglasses strewn around the floor in his living room. He couldn't even tell which ones they were, which SKU number they were, to order a new pair. So he put them in the box with a little note that said, "Here's my credit card number, just charge me, I'm happy to pay for them." Well, 2 days later, he got a box back in the mail. And in that box were two things. The first was a free pair of sunglasses. And the second was a dog bone. And what I love about that story is in 10, 15 seconds, all that information I told you came along for the ride. Maui Jim can say they have great customer service till they're blue in the face. That story shows you what great customer service they have. It's what I'll call a Trojan horse story. Stories aren't just stories, they're vessels or carriers of information. They bring information along for the ride. Yes, there's an engaging outside, but inside you learn something called a kernel about a brand, a product, a service. Right? You watch that Will It Blend video where they blend an iPhone, you learn that they make a really tough blender. You watch that Volvo video, you learn that they have really precise steering. You learn that from the information. Let me give you one last example of this. It's called Panda cheese. It's not cheese made from panda milk. That would be very remarkable. Not sure that's possible. It is an Egyptian company called Panda that makes cheese. And I want you to watch just a couple of their ads. And they're funny, so you can laugh, but you don't have to. But I encourage you to if you find it enjoyable. And I will narrate, because it won't be in English or Norwegian.
Please.
Can I make you a cheese sandwich? No, I'm not hungry.
Just you know why you and
Panda.
Never say no to Panda. I'm going to show you a couple of these. Good morning, good morning. I got you Panda cheese for breakfast. No thanks, I don't feel well.
you know why will by and
Panda.
Never say no to Panda. Dad, why don't we get some Panda cheese? Enough, that's too much already.
just you know why will by and
Panda.
Never say no to Panda. And last but not least, just one more. Dad, why don't we get some Panda?
just you know why
Get one. Get one more.
Panda. Made a
All right, so just to wrap up, today we talked about the 6 key steps to boosting word of mouth. We talked about social currency. How can we make people feel smart, feel special, feel in the know like they're not like everybody else? Triggers, top of mind, tip of tongue. What's our peanut butter? What's the thing in the environment that will remind people of us, even if we're not around? We didn't talk about the next 3, but I wrapped up with stories, right? How can we build a Trojan horse story? When people put their kids to bed at night, nobody tells bedtime facts. Doesn't happen. People tell bedtime stories. Stories are the way we communicate, but certain stories are more effective than others. I hope you enjoyed Panda Cheese. I hope you found it funny, but that's actually not why I showed it to you. I showed it to you because I challenged you to tell someone who wasn't here about it and not mention a particular word. And that word is panda, which is exactly the brand they wanted you to remember. They didn't just do something funny, they built a story that carried their message along for the ride. You don't have to be funny. Funny may not be in your DNA, it not may fit with who your brand is, your identity is, but you need to figure out a story that carries your message, whether it's funny, whether it's inspirational, whether it's exciting, whatever that emotion is, what's the Trojan horse story that'll carry your message? And so one last slide from me. It's a great conference, lots of amazing speakers. I often come back from events like this going, what to do next? So just 2 things from me. First, what is your kernel? What is the thing or things that you want people to talk about and share? I often work with organizations that say, we want more word of mouth. Great. What are you hoping people will talk about, and what will they share? What will they say about your organization or your idea? And then second, once you have that kernel, apply the steps around it. Right? How can we find our social currency? How can we figure out our peanut butter? How can we build a Trojan horse story? And in case it's helpful, there's a workbook on my website, an application guide, just my first name, lastnight.com/resources, and you can download it and work on it with your teams. Because again, it's not random, it's not luck, and it's not chance. There's a science behind why people talk and why they share. If we understand that science, we can craft contagious content, we can build more effective messages and ideas, and we get our stuff to catch on. Thank you guys very much.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
People are sending in questions. One of the questions came in. You've actually answered the question that was sent in. It was sent in quite early, but they're asking basically what kind of advice you would give to encourage more Facebook traffic on B2B. Basically, this applies to all channels. That's what you're saying, right?
I am, and I actually would start before that question to ask a different question. Why do you think Facebook is the right thing to use for B2B? Right? We have this tendency to say, well, people are on it, so I should be on it. But the question is it moving your business forward? Too often, right, we count things like friends and followers, and we assume that matters, but those aren't the metrics that actually are going to help us at the end of the day. We can have lots of connections, but if no one's sharing our stuff, it's not going to be helpful. And so if you found for your business that Facebook is really useful, that's where B2B clients go to find information. I'd be surprised if that's true, but if that works for you, fine. But don't assume that that's the right place to be because other people are there, right? Think about where does your business come from, and how can we get those existing people to talk and get them to share, right? The simplest idea, if you fell asleep for the last 40 minutes and you woke up and you wondered what I talked about, how can we turn our customers into advocates? Whether they're online, they're on Facebook, whether they're offline, wherever they may be, how can we get them to talk and share? Online is a channel, but offline is equally, if not more important.
And do you think, one thing I don't read anymore, I don't read these TripAdvisor.
Yes.
I've stopped reading them because they've lost their social currency, I guess, haven't they? Nobody believes them anymore.
Yeah, and we certainly, online is useful for certain things, and we use that to sift through information, right? So last night I was looking for a restaurant, I go on Yelp, which places have the highest ratings. We're not reading the reviews, but we want to make sure it's pretty good. But if I knew someone here, if I knew more people, for example, I'd ask my friend rather than going on Yelp. And so it's not that online isn't useful. No. It's that offline is just as, if not often more important. And we need to think about both. Technology is certainly important, but the psychology, the behavioral science is equally not more important.
Do you think we can still believe the stories that people tell? I mean, are we at that point now where trust is so fragile, we don't know who to believe anymore?
You know, I think that's an interesting comment. And a lot of times when I work with organizations, they say, we need to find the influencers, the influential people, right? There's a notion that a small percentage of people are highly influential, and if we can just get them to talk or share, we'll be successful. But the challenge is that people don't trust people they don't know. We tend to trust our friends and our colleagues much more than we trust people we don't know. And so, sure, online individuals, people that are famous, they have a wide reach, but they don't have high trust. Our friends, our colleagues, our best friend, we trust them a lot. They don't have as high reach, but they have higher trust. And so we need a little bit of both. If we want to raise awareness about us, certainly online influencers or advertising can be useful. Online influencers are basically like advertising. but they're not very persuasive. Right? Kim Kardashian has millions of followers on social media. I bet none of you have bought something because Kim Kardashian talked about it, right? Right? We tend to trust our friends and our colleagues and say, have you gone? Is it any good? And so that's really where the persuasion comes in.
That's really reassuring to hear, actually. And by the way, during my preparation, I read your 2 books. They're excellent.
Oh, thank you.
Read them. They're really good. And I used the numbers one, the percentage. It's percentage for small numbers, numbers for
Yes.
the bigger.
Yes,
I
rule of
used
100.
that. I used that yesterday.
Yeah.
In an offer to a client.
Yes.
And I got the job. So it
Oh,
does
good.
work. It's brilliant. It's
Congratulations.
really good. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining us,
you.
Jonah. Big
Appreciate
round
it.
of applause.
Thank you guys very much.
Great.